Okay, well, thank you, Stephen, for the introduction.
I do have just a bit
Oh,
more,
go ahead.
Carl.
I'm
I will
sorry.
start with. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Creation Fellowship Santee in California. We're glad you have chosen to spend part of your Thursday evening with us. For those joining us for the first time, Creation Fellowship originally met in person at the Creation and Earth History Museum in Santee, California, but moved to the online platform in May 2020, during the um, pandemic that we had. What started out as a temporary change became a blessing because it allowed us to reach people far beyond Southern California. Today, we're thankful that people and speakers can join us from across the country and even around the world. Our mission comes from 1 Peter 3:15, which tells us to always be ready to to give a reason for the hope that is in us. We believe the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, and we believe that when it is properly understood, it clearly points to the truth of God's creation and stands in contrast to Darwinian evolution. Both scripture and the evidence we see in the world around us point to an intelligent creator. Since moving online in 2020, we have hosted more than 100 unique speakers, scientists, researchers, pastors, teachers, and authors who are dedicated to defending the truth of God's Word. If you'd like to see the full list of speakers, you can find it at www.tinyurl.com/CFS archives, period. You can also watch or listen to many of our past presentations on our social media platforms. On YouTube, we are Creation Fellowship Santee. On Rumble, we are CFS 2020. On BitChute, we are Creation Fellowship Santee. And our podcast is called CFS Virtually There. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Podbeam, and through the Podbeam app in the Google Play Store. If you enjoy these presentations, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Doing so helps these messages travel further and may reach someone who has never heard the gospel before. If you would like to join our reminder for presentations list, you can email Creation Fellowship Santee, which is all one word, at gmail.com. To get you on the list, we do send out, or we do not send out spam. Excuse me. As believers in Jesus Christ, we are called to share the good news. Our hope is in the Lord and in the world that often seems to be losing hope, faith, and even common sense as we share the stability and truth that comes from faith in Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. Thank you for joining us tonight at Creation Fellowship. Let's get started with our presentation with an introduction to Dr. Carl Werner, MD. He is an expert in anatomy and has authored several textbooks very useful to creation science, where he looks closely at the human evolution paradigm. He has spent 3 decades in research and traveled hundreds of thousands of miles actually to visit the scientists involved in documenting the widespread fraud, about 150 cases that Carl has learned about in the so-called scientific field of evolution. His website is www.thegrandexperiment, all one word, .com. To go there to learn much more about him. So please, Dr. Werner, tell us why human evolution is actually a fairy tale.
Thank you, Stephen. It is a fairy tale. You know, these last 2 years have been extraordinary for creation science. And one of the reasons is that it was shown in 2024 in our book series. And this is one of the 2 books on human evolution that was released, is that there has been 150 frauds in the field of human evolution. You know, before that, if you asked a creationist, how many frauds, actual frauds, not just mistakes, have occurred in the field of human evolution, people would have said probably 2, Piltdown Man and then Haeckel's embryos, that fraud. But as we started to add up the number of frauds we encountered, we being my wife and I, it occurred to us as this was the main story. It wasn't my main story when we were filming these interviews, but it was like we added them up and there was 150. Now, Stephen asked me to show the books and the DVDs. These 150 frauds that I'm going to talk about tonight are documented numerically, 1 through 150, in the DVD series. Now, DVD starts with Book 1, Evolution, the Grand Experiment, Volume 2, Living Fossils, which covers the modern animals that were found with dinosaurs. But episodes 3 through 8 go through the frauds in human evolution, and they are extraordinary. That was released in 2024, and then the following year in 2025, in Nature, it was revealed that humans and apes are not 98.6% similar, but we're only 85% similar, which means that we're 450 million letters of DNA different than chimpanzees, which makes the idea of evolving from a chimp-like animal into a human through 450 million mistaken mutations in the correct location and the correct spot on the DNA in the correct cell. The theory of human evolution has essentially collapsed, and that's another talk for another day. But I'm going to go through the widespread frauds in evolution. Let me pull up my screen share and see if we get that right. And
Looks good.
oh, good, thank you. Last week, when I gave the part 1, I made this distinction, and it's very important you understand this: frauds versus mistakes. I'm not talking about mistakes tonight. Mistakes are, scientists mismeasured, he made the wrong guess, etc. We all make mistakes. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying 150 frauds, and 150 frauds is defined as a scientist knowingly misleads by altering photos, altering fossils, altering diagrams, or hiding the most important or critical information. And last week I showed you 21 of these frauds. Dr. F. Clark Howell made this diagram, and 13 of the 14 animals in this diagram were fraudulent. They were either Homo sapiens or animals that they knew weren't ancestors to humans. And we showed you Dr. Philip Tobias, who was trying to create a new type of ape man with a bigger brain than an ape that he called Homo habilis, but he was actually enlarging Australopithecine skulls and got caught at least 3 different times. And his colleague, Dr. Ron Clark, said this fraud was bigger than Piltdown fraud. We also told you about Lucy's fraud last week. He had fraudulent statements about the footprints, about the knee, and about the pelvis. And we also did this fraud, Richard Leakey, where he photoshopped the published pictures to hide the fact that he had split the skull, added spacer, and pulled the front part of the skull down to extend the face, and he admitted that he had done that wrong. So we did 21 frauds last week, and today I think it's like 60 frauds. I'm going to go through these. This is important for you to have some kind of a belief that I'm just not making this up, because this is such a large claim, and I wouldn't believe me unless you were going to give me the facts, and I'm going to give you the facts so you can see that these were frauds based on that definition of fraud. I'm going to start with a Nebraska ape man. This is in the 1920s that this ape man was announced, and this was a large announcement. This was a 2-page spread. You can see my hand over here. This is a large spread showing what Nebraska ape man looked like. And this is in the Illustrated London News. And it turns out that this was a pig tooth. Here's another full-page article on this, the ape man of the Western world, or Hesperopithecus, but it's the Nebraska ape man. And I want you to remember this date, 1922, it gets announced. But in 1927, they realized that this tooth, which was all they had, this is all they had to make up this creature with stone tools and et cetera, turned out to be, this tooth was actually the tooth of this pig called Prasthenops. It was a wild pig, similar to the Eurasian wild pig today. And they said, oh, we're sorry, we made a mistake, et cetera, et cetera. That mistake was reported not in the big splash of full-page stories on the Sunday paper, but was recorded in a 3-column New York Times article printed on a Monday, which nobody probably read, and that the Nebraska's tooth turned out to be a wild pig's. But why would this be fraud, Carl? You're saying that's a mistake, what you're telling us. No, hold on. I'm going to show you the fraud part of it. And it's a story. You almost have to listen for the motive, the means. It's like a murder story. Here is the evidence of the fraud. These 3 scientists from the Natural History Museum in New York, arguably the most important museum in the world at that time, made a discovery 13 years before the announcement in 1909 that the teeth of pigs in Nebraska, where they're going to eventually find the Nebraska ape man, the teeth look like human teeth. It was an oddity. Hey, this is strange. We're not expecting a pig's tooth to look like a human tooth, but scientists beware if you ever come here, because this is a situation. The pig teeth look like human teeth. That's 13 years before this announcement. When they announced it in 1922 and published articles about it, they didn't tell anybody this. They compared this tooth, the Nebraska ape man, which was a pig, to every type of animal like humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, coyotes, etc. But they didn't compare it to the pig teeth. That would be the only thing I'd want to see. Well, let's make sure it's not a pig. They kept this fact hidden on all of their articles. And the second evidence that this was fraud was that he announced it in 1922, and at that time he said they just found the tooth in 1921. But the reality is that tooth was found in 1917, laid on a shelf because it was just another pig tooth. It had no importance, and no one really cared about it. Well, why would these guys risk their whole reputation on this whole wild story? This seems like there's a disconnect here, right? Why would someone do that? Well, now I'm going to give you the background story. In the 1910s and leading up to the Scopes trial, there was this man called William Jennings Bryan, and he was considered the greatest orator of the times. When he spoke, as you see at the bottom here, where he's speaking in Florida in 1921, tens of thousands of people would show up. And he would connect with people and explain to them that evolution is a lie of the devil, and it's going to turn the Bible into a scrap of paper, and there's not enough evidence for it. And he was actually making a lot of headway. Now, you may say, well, who is he? William Jennings Bryan. He was known, he was a household name. He was the Secretary of State in Woodrow Wilson's presidency in the 1900s, 1913. So he's Secretary of State. Everybody knows him, like Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State. He was a congressman for Nebraska twice, so that's a well-known name. And then he actually ran for president in one of the presidential elections in 1896. So he's well known. He's making headway against evolution. And then he made his fatal error. And he wrote this op-ed piece in the New York Times on February 1922. This is before the Nebraska man's announced. And he basically says that teaching evolution makes the Bible into a scrap of paper. There's not enough evidence for human evolution. You only have a few bones. It just doesn't make. And at the end, he challenges the president of the American Museum of Natural History in New York, Henry Fairfield Osborn, and says, I'd like you to answer this in the following Sunday's op-ed piece. Well, that was not what they wanted. They were hating this man, but now they really are seething because now he has to write this big article, the president of the American Museum. He has to defend evolution, which is kind of hard when you actually look at the facts. And he was livid. In fact, he became just like focused for the rest of his life on William Jennings Bryan. Like, how dare you challenge evolution? How dare you challenge me? And he was really kind of put in a spot. Well, this is what they did to fix this. 5 months later, after that op-ed piece exchange between Osborne and William Jennings Bryan, 5 months later, they announced we found a pig tooth. I mean, we found an ape man. And when it came out in the New York Times, it was a big spread. It's a Sunday edition, a big, I don't know how many columns that is, 4 columns, 5 columns. And this was then used to taunt William Jennings Bryan. The argument went this way: Brian, you're denying human evolution, but there's an ape man found in Nebraska, not very far from your home. How could you be so blind as a Christian to ignore this evidence because there's apes and ape men that lived in the United States? And it silenced William Jennings Bryan, and he went to the Scopes trial a few years later, and he died shortly after the Scopes trial, and mission accomplished. It worked. And so they had the means, they had those tooth laying around, they had the motive, they wanted to silence a Christian, and they carried it out, and you can document it, which I just did for you. And all that's in the video series. Again, I'm trying to get through as many of these frauds as we can without going too fast. Try to explain the story so you can understand. This next one is one that's on display right now at all the major museums of the world. It's called Tumai, or Sahelanthropus chadensis, by Dr. Michel Brunet. We interviewed him, and he carried out 4 extraordinary frauds, and we brought this to light. First of all, Tumai was this skull. It was found laying on top of the sand. You can see it here. This photo was taken the day it was discovered, and it was found next to a femur, a leg bone, okay? That's the basic background story, so you can follow this. After it was discovered, the following year, it was on the cover of Time and Nature. You couldn't get any bigger than that. And it was important because it was 7 million years old. That would put it at the base of human evolution, according to the evolutionists. And it had a spinal cord that suggested it was walking upright. Ever heard that story before? Every ape man, they always say it walked upright. So at the Smithsonian today, it shows the Tumai skull with the vertebrae going up into the skull where the spinal cord is coming up, but it's not in the back like an ape, and it's not in the center like a human, but it's somewhere in between an ape and a human. And so that proves it walks upright. And here's what I'm talking about. Here's a chimp skull. You can see the foramen magnum where the spinal cord comes into the skull. It's in the back, and here's a human. It's in the front. And Tumai's was somewhere in between. But hold on, this guy is a fraudster. He made a series of fraudulent statements both to us when we interviewed them and also to the press, and the same statements were also printed in his journals. He said when he found the specimen, it was, you couldn't see the fossil, but that's not true. It was laying on top of the sand. And they could only see part of the fossil, and they had to dig the fossil out of the rock. And see, that is a lie, because there is what the skull was. In a lot of these North African nations, fossils just lay on top of the ground. Same like Ethiopia, Lucy just laying on top of the ground. It's very common for them just to be out and weathered. And this is what they found. This is exactly what it looked like when they came upon it. And he said they had to dig it out of the rock because that allowed him to say, I dated the rock, and the rock was 7 million years old. So now he's able to say, I found the oldest ape man ever known. So he set himself up, but he didn't realize that he alienated his primary co-worker, Dr. Alan Bouvillain, who lined up with us and told us the whole story. That's how I have all this background information, because he was actually, Dr. Bouvillain was actually there when the skull was discovered. He actually took this photo. But anyway, here's the skull, here's the femur on the day of discovery. He said in our interviews, in his publications, that only the skull was found. The rest of the skull was missing. There was no leg bones. He also did this in his French science journal. There was an absence of any bony remains of the limbs. But that's a lie, because you just saw the femur was laying right next to it. Now, why do you think he would not want you to see the femur? And by the way, evolution scientists just by and large don't know any of this story. So enjoy. You can take them to task on this. 17 years later, because of Dr. Bouvillain, who helped us, this thing was reported in Nature that he had been hiding this femur for 17 years, and he had given orders to have it destroyed by another scientist. And that's all documented in this article. So why would he not want this femur to be known? You'd think more bones, the more famous he would get. The problem is, and here's a scientist, evolution scientist, is the overall shape of this leg bone looks like a modern chimpanzee. Now I've done the work for you, and this is even more beautiful in the video series when you see these laying up. So I took pictures of a modern chimp femur, and then I took these. This is one bone, and this is one bone, but it's just turned 4 different ways: side view, front view, back view, inside, outside. Do you see it? Same way. These are the same 4 bones. If you lay these on top of the modern chimp, look what happens. And that's why he didn't want it to be found, because that makes no sense for a modern chimpanzee femur-like bone to be part of an ape man that walks upright. You see, isn't that beautiful? That's just like, you can't get any more motivation to hide or try to have this thing destroyed. Here's the next fraud he carried out. Here's a gorilla skull with the spinal cord hole. Here's a human with the spinal cord hole. Here's a Toomai skull with the spinal cord hole, basically the same position as an ape. It's in the back. But if you'll notice the teeth on the human, it's right and left teeth. This is looking up underneath. And see, they don't go anywhere near the spinal cord. But the Toomai teeth, here's right teeth and here's left teeth. The teeth and the whole dental arcade are turned. The whole skull is twisted and gnarly and crushed. And they had to untwist it using a CAT scan. And they had to make a decision, what are we going to do with this hole? Because you can tell the hole's all crushed. It's not even right shape. And they said, we have a choice. The spinal cord hole is in the back like an ape, but there's this bone here, part of the occiput. And they said, we can either move this end of the bone up and then we'll have an ape man, or we can move this part of the bone down and we'll have an ape. Well, guess what they did? They moved this part up, and they ended up with a spinal cord hole halfway between an ape and a human. And there is the frauds of Toomai. And I don't know how many we've done so far, but these are incredible frauds. These are, and they're documented. That's what's so crazy about this. We'll go on to the next fraudster, and this is Ernst Haeckel. Now, Ernst Haeckel is close to my heart because he converted me to evolution when I was 19 years old. When I was 18 years old. I was in medical school, first semester of medical school, 6-year accelerated program. I was in my freshman year. I was 18 years old. And the professor put up diagrams of Ernst Haeckel that convinced me that evolution was true. It's a sad story because the professor should have told me this diagram had been disproved 100 years earlier, but he didn't. He just said it was true. I want to put this in perspective because people don't understand who Ernst Haeckel was. There was Charles Darwin, the person who came up with the theory of evolution. He started to lose favor. When he died, Ernst Haeckel surpassed Charles Darwin as the spokesperson for evolution. He was the most famous evolution scientist in the world. Nobody even came close to being a second. And why was he famous? Because he came up with all this evidence for evolution that all turned out to be fraud. Here's the diagram that convinced me. The professor said, look, here's a fish embryo. Here's embryos is before they're born. Salamander embryos at 3 different stages. Turtle, chicken. You can see that like the turtle, it looks like this, but then by the time it's ready to be born or hatch out of the egg, it already has a shell on it, you know, and the human looks whatever it looks like. But then by the time the human is ready to be born, it looks like a human, more or less. But the professor's point was this, Haeckel's point, that look, in the early stages of embryos, all animals look like a fish. Turtle looks like a fish, chicken looks like a fish, rabbit looks like a fish, a human looks like a fish. We all have gills. We all have a tail. Even the humans have a long tail. And so he said this proves that we all evolved from a common ancestor of fish, and then eventually we progressed in embryology, and we developed into just whatever we turned out to be. Someone in 1990 finally said, hey, let's don't trust his diagrams. Let's take a photograph it and replace each one of these with the real photo of the real embryo at this stage. And let's see how close he was. Here we are from the left, fish embryo. Oh, it doesn't even look like a fish embryo. Or no, this is a fish embryo. It doesn't look like Haeckel's drawing. Salamander. Oh, that doesn't look like what he showed us. The turtle. That doesn't, and by the way, there's no gill slits. Where happened to the gill slits? And here's a chicken, no gill slits. And here's a rabbit, no gill slits. And the human, none of these animals even look like they're the same animal. They look like 6 different animals, which they are. But Haeckel had put the wool over the eyes of the world, and no one even thought at that time to question his drawings. And his drawings are everything. His drawings are these 58 frauds. I'm going to show you some of these 58 right now. That was 6. His drawings, and here's the embryos. This is my favorite fraud of you asked me. I just heard someone ask in the audience, what is your favorite fraud of all the 150 frauds? It's this one. It is so bold. Okay, so this is Ernst Haeckel's diagram. See, it's written in German here, and he put up a drawing. It's a woodblock drawing of a dog's embryo at an even earlier stage, and a chicken embryo and a turtle. And this is even earlier than what I just showed you, okay? And he said, look how similar the dog embryo is. Each of these features, they're so similar, and this means that the turtle, chicken, and dog all came from a common ancestor, and that we shared this evolutionary history, and that's why they look the same. In 1915, about 30 years after this was published or so, there was a scientist in India that wrote a book called The Frauds of Haeckel. It's a good book. And he said, look at figure 9, and this turns out to be the exact same woodblock drawing that he just print, and just put 3 different names. I'm sorry. I couldn't be this bold. I just couldn't be this bold to take the same exact picture. And that's not the only one he did it on. He was taking the same pictures and relabel them and say, look how similar we are. Okay, I'm just giving you the highlights of these 58. Here's the next one. Haeckel said, and by the way, Haeckel was the reason for the Holocaust. He made the Holocaust because he made the Jews less than human, et cetera, et cetera. That's a whole nother story. But Haeckel said, look, starting here at number 12, which would be the first animal, monkeys, these are 3 living monkeys, evolved into apes, these are 3 living apes, which evolved into these 5 humans in order. So in other words, an ape evolved into a Negro, which evolved into, I'm going to mess these up, I'll identify them in just a second, into a Papua New Guinean, into an American Indian, and they get, if you'll notice, the faces just keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller until you get the perfect white Greek goddess here with a flat face. That would be the epitome of evolution. See, he made everybody here ape men, the blacks, the Chinese, the American Indians, Eskimo. Well, whenever you see something from Haeckel, you'd say, is it a picture or is it a photograph? It's a picture. Oh, that means Haeckel drew it. Oh, that means it's fraud. So here we go. I took the time to pull the skulls for these. And just a point here, all gorillas, all apes and all monkeys have a prognathic face, meaning that the face sticks way out in front of the skull case. This is a monkey, this is a monkey, this is a lesser ape. The face sticks out in front of the skull case. The orangutan face sticks way out, chimp there. Okay, we all agree that primates have a face that sticks out. But he said these 5 humans had a prognathic face. But if you look at the skulls of this guy's a Papua New Guinean, this one's an African black man, this one's an Australian Aborigine, American Indian, and Asian, Chinese, the skulls are all the same. They're all flat without the face sticking out. So really it should have been apes with the face sticking out and humans with their not sticking out, but he misled, and also he changed all their species names and made the black man Homo niger. He no longer is a human being, Homo sapiens, he's Homo niger, et cetera, et cetera. And this is another one classic that Haeckel changed the drawing of Thomas Huxley. Huxley was his predecessor. He was very well respected. And Huxley made this drawing of a gibbon, orangutan, chimpanzee, gorilla, and man. And he showed the point of this was that man is an ape, which it's just not true. But he drew these correctly, like the big toe of a gorilla, all these apes, the big toe on the foot is like a thumb, it sticks out. It's not parallel with the second through the fifth toes. And he showed the skulls proportionally smaller than the human brains part. You know, these are all smaller. The gibbon's even smaller. And these are all correct. Haeckel then decides to put this in his book, and he redraws it, and he enlarges the chimp to be a skull as big as the human or bigger. Same with the orangutan. He enlarges that. He pulls all their toe bones in line so they all look like the human toes. And there's other things here, but his basic point is, look, we are all apes. There's no difference between us. And humans are apes. So yeah, only if you commit fraud on the nth degree. See, there's how he did the toes, the big toes all lined up, whereas it should look like this, where the big toe is separated. So he did 58 frauds. The next fraud I'm going to do is Piltdown Man. And most people would say Piltdown Man, that was a fraud. It was actually 5 frauds. And I will explain that in just a second. Piltdown Man was like 1920, I think, 1912. It was an orangutan jaw, a modern orangutan jaw, a modern human skull, an elephant bone that had been carved to make it look like a digging tool, and a tooth from an orangutan. And somebody, some scoundrel, put all of these together in one dig site called Piltdown 1, and then these two guys discovered the bones. They thought it was real, and they announced that they had found this man, Piltdown Man, and this was not a minor thing. This was in the New York Times. Darwin's theory was proved true because of Piltdown Man. It was at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. It was in Time, 15 times, Life magazine, National Geographic, Scientific American, etc. And then someone realized it was a fake, that this tooth here was actually an orangutan tooth, a modern orangutan tooth, that same tooth that had been filed down. Then it made a hole in the root canal, so they had to fill it up with gum. And then they took Van Dyke brown oil paint and painted the outside. And no one noticed all this for 40 years. And then they filed down the teeth. But the real question was, who did this? And was it fraud, or was it just a prank, or what is this? And that question went on for 40 years plus. And finally, in November 1953, it was revealed that it was a fraud. And then back in the 1990s, just recently, they realized it was the scientist at the Natural History Museum. He became the curator there, Martin Hinton. He not only made the one Piltdown fraud, he planted the same bones into a different location, Piltdown 2. He also made the elephant leg bone into a digger. He also planted extinct beaver animals' teeth in there so it looked like it was an old site. And he took rocks and stained them, modern rocks, and stained them to make them look old. Fraud, 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 fraud by the Natural History Museum scientists. So it's 9:12. Let's see. I think I have 18 more minutes. I'll try to whip through this real quick. I'm going to go a little faster if you don't mind. Neanderthal man was found in 1856, I think it was. And this is all they found. It was in Mettmann, Germany. We filmed this in Mettmann. And problem was there's just not enough bones. They didn't know what Neanderthal man was. They were discussing it, and they said if we just had more skull. Then about 20 years later, they found this skull in Spee, Belgium, in this cave, and they say, oh, well, we have a little bit more, but we still don't know what Neanderthal is. Is it an ape? Is it a man? Is it an ape man? We have no idea. Then pay dirt was 19, I'm going to say, I'm guessing all these years. I just can't pull them off the top of my head, but let's just say 1906, okay? They found this skeleton in 1906 in La Chapelle aux Saints, France. We filmed there. And here's the skull out of there. And it was almost a complete skull, almost a complete skeleton. And it's like, finally, we're going to find out what Neanderthal man looks like. The scientist who was at the Natural History Museum in Paris said, when I reconstructed all these bones, this is what Neanderthal looks like. He looks like a gorilla bent over using rocks, human feet though. See that the toes are in it. And he's grunting and hairy, and he has bent knees like an ape. And it turned out it was actually a human being, Homo sapiens. But this is what he promoted for 40 years while he was alive. And the way he got away with this was the following four frauds. First of all, the skull, I wish I could blow this up. Oh yeah, I'll show this here in a little quick here. The skull, this is the skull. He moved the foramen magnum. He moved it from the human position and he moved it back. And how could you move the foramen magnum? The skull looks complete. Well, here's how he did it. This is actually what the skull was and where bones were missing. This allowed him to take the foramen magnum and move it either direction. And he moved the foramen magnum of La Chapelle aux Saints backwards to be halfway between a chimp and a human. Now that's really dirty. Second thing he did was he changed what human neck bones look like. This is what they really look like, but he faked up what human neck bones look like. And he said, look, chimpanzees, the spinous process goes backwards, straight. Neanderthal, it goes backwards, straight, but humans goes down. So Neanderthal is closer to chimps, but actually Neanderthal is Homo sapiens, it's modern man. This was found out after the scientist died. And this scientist also said, look, Neanderthal had bent knees because this knee is retroflexed up here at the top. But he knew, and I can prove this, that this bone existed, and he saw this bone, which was a modern Parisian, modern man from Paris who died recently. The bone was probably from the catacomb, that had the same look on his bone with it bent back. But he said, no, the structure of the tibia here shows that he couldn't straighten his knee, and he had to have a bent knee position the whole time. He knew that wasn't true because he had this Parisian tibia here that said otherwise. So the biggest human evolution frauds are these, and there are multiple frauds in each one, and that would take 6 hours to go through them. That's why we have the video series, and these are stunning videos, I'm telling you. And who were the perpetrators? It was these characters, the greatest scientists that we know of in this field. Johansen, Tobias, Brunet, Dart, Leakey, Howell, Broom, Heckel, Boole, Osborne, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're not excited by now, you're probably dead. You need to check your pulse, because what this did was not only overturns evolution, but it also overturns all of naturalism, because prior to 2024, the origin of the universe was not working out with the Big Bang. It doesn't work. Origin of life from chemicals doesn't work. The origin of animal phyla does not show in the fossil record. Origin of animals within the phyla does not work. According to Stephen Jay Gould, the mechanism of evolution do not work. 3 best proofs of evolution were walking whale, which was disproved in our volume 1, flying feathered dinosaurs, which was disproved in our volume 1, and now this was the last pillar standing to believe anything that naturalism works. And when it goes down, the whole thing goes down. I certainly hope you take advantage and watch our DVD series. There's 8 episodes. And if you're younger than 40 years old, you probably want to stream it. And it's available by streaming also. And you can watch it on your phone or your computer. It's really nice to buy the streaming from through our website. Then you can just watch them when you're stuck at the airport or something. And just, they're beautiful shows shot on location, and it costs enormous amount of money to produce these, which we'll never get back, which is okay. And I would encourage you to buy all 4 books and just burn through these. They only take about an hour, 3 hours to read each book, and they're very photographic. Each book has 900 photos or so in it. So you burn through them. It's very simple explanations with just a lot of pictures so you can understand it. And as I've told Leilani when she interviewed me for her podcast, my heart is that this information doesn't end with me, that this gets to you, but then it doesn't die with you either, that you be the conduit to get this to the schools and the children that you know that are between 6th grade and 12th grade, and do all 4 of these books as 4 semesters in a row of creation science. You add it to math, you add it to your curriculum that you already have, and the kids won't mind it because it's just a fun curriculum. And my heart is that you will pick this up and figure out a way for you to get it into your schools. Debbie and I, as I told you last time, we're just two old people in St. Louis. You know, we don't have any resources. we don't have a staff. You know, we don't have a advertising budget. We have zero. But somehow God is making this all work through the way He does things. And that would involve you. And I'm asking you, please figure out how to who in your circle of grandkids or the school your kid goes to, how could you get it into that school? How could you do it in your homeschool program? I know Leilani taught it, so thank you very much. I'm going to turn off my screen share, and I think I made it with 10 minutes to spare. Everybody was worried that I wouldn't be able to get through 58.
You said 65.
Okay,
But
I decreased it to it was 65 because yeah, it was about that 60.
well, that was really fast. Uh, if you needed another 10 minutes, you were
No,
definitely welcome to them.
no, I'll just do questions and be mindful of everybody's time.
Okay, well, I'm gonna start out with my question.
Okay.
And so I'm very much into creation, so I don't really pay much attention to what the evolution crowd is saying. Um,
Which
you
is
know, it,
smart.
yeah, but so if they're teaching it in school in the textbooks, which Kent Hovind, I don't know if you know who he was. He did
Sure.
a great series, and he's the one who turned me on to creation. All of these were in the textbooks, but Kent's videos were very old. What are they doing in the textbooks now? I mean, since so much of this has been disproven.
Oh, no, no, they have not taken any of this down. It's
Oh,
all still in the books. Homo habilis is still in the books. Tumai's in the books. Neanderthal man's in the book. Lucy's in the books. No, they don't take it down. No, it's still there. And that's why it's so fun. This is an opportunity for everybody to jump on this, because you could just go to the textbook and say, look here, let's go watch this segment from this show and see how foolish this is. What are you guys doing? Neanderthal was fraud based.
so everything that they're teaching pretty much. Now, are there really any? Somebody once said that there were like 200 missing links.
Well,
To me, it seems like there isn't any.
200 missing links that have been found.
Yes.
Well, if you speak outside of the human evolution field, uh, if you ask an evolutionist, they could come up with thousands. But what they're doing is they're taking like 2 dinosaurs, and said we think these 2 T-Rex-like dinosaurs evolved into each other. They're not taking one animal, changing into a completely different kind of animal, like a dog to a sea lion, or a dog to a seal, or a dog to a whale. But Stephen Jay Gould says, who is a Harvard professor and an atheist, said that they're basically, the transitional evidences for transition is seemingly absent, except for a rare occasion. And those rare occasions are whale evolution, which has been disproved in our book series, bird evolution, which has been disproved in our book series, and human evolution, which now is disproved. And when you look at this globally, so if you ask an evolutionist, they say, "Oh, this is the greatest theory in the world," but they're not on reality. You're on reality. You can see it for yourself, and they will never give up. They just keep come up with new theories, new ideas, new facts, et cetera, et cetera. But at some point, you look at the global picture here. There's like 150 frauds in this field, and then you were also saying 220 ape men have been overturned, and then they were renaming ape men, like Neanderthal man had 44 different scientific names to it, and 45,000 tools were overturned for ape men, and then humans and chimps are 15% different. And it just goes on. The whole thing has collapsed, but evolutionists don't expect them to get on board till about 90 years from now. It's going to take about 90 years for them to come on board.
That's a very specific amount of time, 90 years.
Well, I'm just saying that that's how it usually goes. Like Galileo, he showed in the sky that I'm probably going to get this wrong, but that, like, if you look at the North Star and you look at the Mars every night, it keeps moving towards the North Star, but then one night it'll start going backwards. And he said, and this is like 1660, don't quote me on these dates. He said the only way to explain this is that the Earth is not the center of our solar system. The sun is. And that was like 1650, and it wasn't until 1720 that the world converted. It was 70 years later. Same with Neanderthals and all these.
Okay.
Generally, it's 50 years, 70 years, 80 years, but it could be 1 year from now. Maybe the world will get a flash, and I'll read my book, and I don't believe it. It's not. It's going to be decades while they're fighting a losing battle.
Okay, so that's where this specific time frame came in. Okay, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
Okay, Steve, I have asked my questions.
Okay, I'm looking at a few comments that were here. One was by Terry, and she mentioned that Haeckel could also be credited for Roe v. Wade, possibly, and the enormous skyrocketing of abortion, the bloodiest hands in history. And remember that Haeckel also was used in Icons for Evolution, which was a pretty famous book a few years back by the intelligent design community. And so this whole thing has been known about for a long time, but the evolutionists say, well, teach it anyway. The artwork's free, and it's basically right anyhow because hey, evolution is true.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
exactly true. Haeckel was disproved. The embryos were disproved in about 1880, something like that. 1880, and yet I was taught it in 1977. That was there's another 90 years. It was about 90 years later, and they're still teaching it, even though the scientists in his day said these drawings don't match up. But yeah, so Haeckel was a scoundrel.
Right. And Eugenie Scott was one of the ones who said, go ahead and continue to use it because it's readily available and that sort of thing.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay. Linda Edwards said, I show the Grand Experiment Volume 1 to my biology class every year. Have the first 2 videos and the books, so she does use them. But you now have 4 videos because you've included the latest 2 on human evolution.
Yeah, actually, there's 4 video boxes, but the last 2 boxes have 3 shows in it. So it's really an 8-part video series.
Yeah.
And they go through, like, the video series, like one show is frauds in human evolution in Europe. Another one is frauds in human evolution in Africa. Another one is frauds in human evolution in North and South America.
Yeah.
And they're broken down that way. So there's 8 shows. If you've only seen 2, you got some work to do. And then there's basically 4 books now. The 5th book is a bibliography, but just 4 books. And the last 2 of those books are on human evolution.
Yeah, and the
much of the information I just shared.
bibliography is also important.
Oh yeah,
The way you did it.
Oh, thank you for asking. I showed this to everybody. I don't know if anybody's repeat from tonight, but here's the bibliography for volumes 3 and 4, and that's why I show it to you. The bibliography it was so big, so we had to put it in a separate volume, and it's 432 pages long, where we documented all the interviews, the facts, the whole thing, so you can track anything that I say to see if it's true. So yeah, I'm glad you read it. And this is interesting reading, I'm telling you.
Okay, so all of this is available where?
So the best place to order our products is through our website. If you go to like a third party like Amazon or the Ministries, which I'm happy for you to do that if it's easier for you, but they basically are getting the stuff from us. So just come to our website, thegrandexperiment.com, and then when you put your order in, this amazing thing, my wife comes up from downstairs and she puts the book into the box and then takes it to the post office. So it's like direct, and it's otherwise it goes to this person and to that person and it gets to you. So
The unsung hero, the wife that puts the book in the
oh my
box.
gosh.
Right.
Without Debbie, this thing would be kaput. I mean, I wouldn't have got anything done. Nothing.
Steve, looks like there's a few more comments or questions in the chat.
Yeah, there was some question about artwork, and I'm not sure if I really understand what it is, but I think
No, Rob is just saying a good creative artist, but a very poor scientific illustration. I think it's just he's being a little snarky.
Oh
Like I
yeah,
am.
yeah. A very good
okay.
artist. Yeah, because it is pretty art, but very poor scientist. That's a good analogy. Good
Yeah,
analysis.
okay. Well, I think some of those were very creative, especially when you think of Nebraska Man.
Oh,
I mean, he gets a whole family out of a tooth.
oh my gosh.
And then it is ready to be used as evidence in the Scopes trial,
Yeah.
a
Never
100 years
trust
ago.
never trust any diagram, any drawing, unless
Right,
it's a photograph. And then you got to be careful because they're doctored too. Really, the best thing is to be an original fossil. And
right,
that's why we got access to the original fossils. I didn't mean to cut you off, Stephen, but we got access to the original fossils, and that's where all these frauds started coming out. Is like, well, the original fossil doesn't match the copy of the fossil. It doesn't match the photo of the fossil, their photo of the fossil. And so the only thing you can really trust is original fossils.
yeah.
Yeah.
But only if you can gain access to them.
Yeah. And so it's not science because you can't.
No,
And so it's really, it needs to be changed into like a club. Human evolution is like a club, and you can, get in to see the fossils if you know the password and all that. But it's not science. Science is reproducible, so that any scientist should be able to come in, look at your fossils, and reproduce the same conclusions.
yeah,
But it's not science, it's a club.
okay. There's a question. Has Dr. Werner ever heard of the Folsom Man found near found in or near Folsom, New Mexico?
I am not up to speed on that, but I assume that it's one of those giants. Is it one of the giants?
We'll have to ask Bill during the
Yeah.
discussion time frame.
So I am not familiar with that, but if it is one of the giants, I used to not believe that a giant had been found, giant human, even though they're mentioned in the Bible.
Mhm.
But then one of the scientists that we interviewed, he was the director at the University of Witwatersrand Department of Anthropology. He was of unprecedented credentials. He's in a video where he pulls out a femur of a human that in the video he's saying between 10 and 13 feet tall.
They found those on Catalina Island in California.
Is
As a
that
matter of
right?
fact, yep, I took a trip to Catalina Island just to go to the museum that had the bones and the pictures. But when I was there in 2016, that's when I went, the the picture of the giant skeleton was cut out of it, and they had no idea what I was talking about. But there had been articles from the 70s showing that these giant bones were in that museum in Catalina Island.
Interesting. Interesting.
And the Smithsonian has a huge cover up. So this is going out to the world via YouTube and all the platforms. The Smithsonians are frauds. Okay, I'm muting.
Okay. All right. Um, I think Jim Welsh may ask a question little bit later. Here's a question. Have any of the secular museums and scientists taken action, that is, like removed exhibits, written retraction statements, etc., based on revelations from interviews in your videos?
No, no, there's been no movement. And I'll just be fair to them. Nobody knows who I am. I'm a very small fry. I don't know. For some reason, my followers are on Twitter is 16 or something like that. And the number of followers. And for some reason, God has me muted, so I don't get to. I've tried, but no one will. I've tried to give interviews to different newspapers. Nobody will pick up the story. I don't think. I think they think I'm a nutcase or something. So to be
No,
fair
they
to
just
them,
don't want to know the truth.
or they don't. That's probably it more. And to be fair to them, they might not even know that all those frauds are going on. Like everybody should remove Tumai from their things, from their museums,
Yeah,
and everybody has to take the Homo habilis skulls that were altered out and
right.
remove that name, et cetera. But no, to answer your question, Bob, no, there's been zero movement based on Carl Werner. So again, that falls to your responsibility. Not to put a burden on you, but you have to pick up this information, read it, kind of get a little familiar with it, and start talking, and then as keep spreading the word. But I know that's kind of smallish to do it that way. I kind of the way Jesus did it with 12 people. How many people are on tonight? Do we have 12
Yeah,
people?
no, we got 20 people or so.
Okay, well, good. We got more than a quorum to change the world since Jesus did it with just 12.
Sure. Okay. And this is a question I think I discussed with you later or earlier, and it had to do with your access to these guys. How, would you explain again, real quick, how you were able to gain access?
Yeah, so before we released a first book or anything, Debbie and I formed a television production company, Audiovisual Consultants Incorporated, and I tasked myself to produce a television series for national, international broadcast, which it was broadcast nationally and internationally, on the topic of evolution. So we would call up scientists. They didn't know who I was. I was unpublished, and we fly out to see you and do this interview? Sure, come on out. Everybody in the scientific field is like feels like they don't get enough attention, so they're happy to have somebody come out. And they never really asked if I was a creationist or evolutionist, but they just assumed that I was evolutionist. So they told stories about their colleagues committing fraud. I don't think they would have given me the interview if I told them that I was questioning evolution. But since they thought that I was an evolutionist, and they just pretty much gave me a lot of information that you wouldn't have found otherwise.
Yeah. And I think with what you presented here tonight, each one of the frauds you've discussed, you've detailed what the fraud was. And so, you walk in there and you see the Tumai man in there or something like that, you would have some difficult questions for the people at those museums.
Oh, I would have very difficult questions. Very difficult.
Yeah.
If they,
I
if
mean, but you've given us the ability to.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, and as I was telling Stephen that I'm writing this book now called Lucy is an Ape, where I'm taking the audience through each bone of Lucy, one bone per page, 47 bones or whatever. And I say, okay, here's Lucy's whatever, foot bone. Now here's 4 foot bones from 4 different apes, a orangutan, a gorilla, a gibbon, etc. And here's the same foot bone in a human. So compare Lucy's foot bone to these 4 apes and a human. What does it look like to you? And everyone is like, well, that's an ape because it looks just like the apes and it doesn't look anything like the human. And I just do it 2 pages at a time. You flip it over, there's 4 feet on there. Here's a human foot, and you compare it. And this is going to be so fun for everybody because you just whip through it and you're like, these guys have been telling us a lie about Lucy having all of her toes together, because all of the bones that they found with the Lucy skeleton and other bones around there, the talus bone, the navicular bone, the calcaneus bone, the medial cuneiform, and the first metatarsal, they all are ape that of an ape that goes out a separated thumb. All the bones are, and they're clearly that. So you guys are going to have so much fun when that gets released, maybe next year or something. So get ready.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Carl. We're going to have some further discussion after the recording stops, but I'm going to go ahead and close the session here. So we are Creation Fellowship Santee. You can find a list of our upcoming speakers at tinyurl.com/CFS or CFSANTEE. You can find us on Facebook and all our video platforms like BitChute, Rumble, YouTube are found at www.tinyurl.com/CFS and that's it. So please subscribe to our channels and like the videos, as it helps us get the word out that our Christian faith is not a blind faith, but solidly based in evidence and reality from the very first verse of the Holy Bible. I'm Steve Hendrickson, signing off now with Dr. Carl Werner. Okay.
All right.